Excellent stuff. Thank you very much indeed to our panel there and to Natalie for hosting that. So what we've seen then is that there is a clear demand for these digital services. And, you know, there's quite a lot of spending power represented by some of the people that we've had here. That's spending power that might come your way. So I think there is clear incentive for us to work together to make this happen. Working together is the critical point, and that's the subject of the next session here. Is that by definition, international trade has one person at one end in one country and another person at the end. It's no good us doing something which works in the UK but doesn't work at the other country end. So interoperability and end-to-end digitalisation is absolutely critical here. How do we make sure that there isn't some break in the system that requires the blue ink or the piece of paper or the PDF that will risk the benefits that we can generate through digitalisation? So I'll now introduce you to our next panel, which is going to discuss that question of interoperability, chaired by Sean. Are you mic'd up? And I will hand over to you to go. Sean, I should say, if you don't know him, is the chairman of the International Trade and Forfaiting Association, and has been involved with this for this area for a long, long time. So he speaks with a great deal of expertise, and he has an excellent panel to discuss interoperability. So over to you, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, everybody. I'll just wait 30 seconds while the audience, the panel gets mic'd up. But thank you. What a great panel that was before us, because that really set up what we're going to talk about. And I've never, I think, heard the need and the corporate rationale for digitization made so well. And Sue, I don't know if you're still in the audience, but you said one of my favorite phrases, digital promissory notes. Thank you for that. I go to bed chanting digital promissory notes, and I wake up in the morning singing digital promissory notes, because actually, one of the points that we could have made in that panel is actually it's what Marcus was talking about, incorporating the power of those old instruments. But remember, if they're old, a bit like me, they're old, but they're good, right? They're there for a reason. They still have a purpose. The problem is the delivery and the mechanisms that we use to deliver those. So where the inefficiency has come in. Remember, all these instruments grew up in a period when the world was much smaller. Things moved much more slowly. But now we've got to deal with the speed of and the velocity of the modern economy. And I think these instruments that have all those benefits, combined with digitization, have really got a huge role to play. So I'm waiting for the picture to change. We've got a couple of people joining us remotely. I have to do it on the clicker. Wow, okay, that's very complicated. Yeah. Right, I should join the panel. Nick has kindly introduced me, but let me just briefly introduce our panelists. And I think we're going to have our people joining in from Singapore sometime. We've got two remote speakers. So firstly here on my right, Sylvia Nowak from Collins Aerospace, and you are a global trade technology manager. So I know you talk the talk because you've done a lot of research into this, but you actually have to walk the walk, and you to implement this on a real and meaningful practical level. Then Dean Vigia.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Terrible with Dutch names, even worse with the Asian ones. Who is also from Deloitte, but again another man who is not just talking the talk but walking the walk, because you're going to take us through actually what you have done in relation to some single window implementation and really marrying things and making things much more smooth at the import level sort of globally. And then finally, we have Dietmar Jost, who is from the Global Express Association. So again, looking at sort of issues that we in ITFA and at ICC look at. So I was going to kick off with one of our remote speakers, who is Satvinder Singh from ASEAN. I'm not sure he's on. Do we have them? We don't know where they've gone. Okay, technology, as always, you know, this is one of the rules, isn't it? In any tech conference, it's always going to be a tech.
It's not Hannah came in.
Hannah came in, did she? Yeah. Okay. Well, look, let's wait a second for Satvinder, because I wanted him to really set up what you know, a big picture. So I like to go from the big picture to the smaller pictures. The big picture was Satvinder, who's a Deputy Secretary General ASEAN, is excuse me, I've got a bad cold man. Is how you set it up, how you set up the whole environment for digitalization of trade. We'd love to do it globally one shot, of course. That's very difficult. I mean, we're hearing from the last panel that they're having to work, unfortunately, still in almost corporate silos. Thank you, Nick. In almost corporate silos. Globally, we have the ability, here we go. We have the ability, of course, to do things globally through wonderful people such as WTO. I see a representative on the front row there. But often we're looking at implementation of digitalization and promotion of digitalization through significant hubs. And one of those, of course, is Asia Pac. So Satvinder, can I pass over to you and tell us what you're doing to promote digitalization in the Asia Pac region and through ASEAN? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, very good. So, warm greetings from the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. And thank you for ICC UK for allowing us to have this platform to share our experiences and our challenges that we are facing in our part of the world in digitalization of the trade supply chain. As you know, we are one of the fastest growing digital regions in the world. And as well, we recognize how important it is for us to harness digitalization, especially throughout the physical and financial supply chains, which are very critical for us in order to make sure that we are relevant and we remain competitive in the world. So there's a lot of stress on our part. And therefore, as you notice that actually we have not been sitting on our laurels. In fact, the last 1 year, we have actually gotten the 10 countries of ASEAN. ASEAN is a grouping like the European Union with 10 member states. And we've actually managed to get the leaders of the 10 member states to agree to come forward on negotiating for the first time a regional-wide, the world's first regional-wide digital agreement that will be legally binding. And it's going to be a digital agreement that's going to be very comprehensive, that's going to touch everything from the movement of data across borders, the setup of data centers, right down to things like digital payments, digital identities, and even harmonization of cybersecurity rules, including the need for us to look at interoperability rules that are going to be harmonized in the region. We are also going to be touching on e-commerce, the improvement of e-commerce online, including physical issues on, for example, the handling of low-value goods across online requirements, which, as you know, there's so much of inefficiencies in the world today. And more importantly, of course, this agreement is also going to be covering trade digitalization, which, of course, is the focus of our session today. I'm glad to inform you that trade digitalization itself is a central component of this DEFA agreement, the Digital Economic Framework Agreement. And at the same time, as part of the negotiations, we are making sure that it will be the center of the agreement. And already, actually, as a region, we have been working very hard in the last 1-2 decades to set up what I call the exchange of digital documents. It's already happening today. As of January this year, we are already, for example, the biggest FTA that binds our region, the Artiga Agreement, the 10 countries where we trade with each other on a preferential basis. Now, the digital document, the document that can be used to file for the rule of origin issues and to get the concessions, today we have made it compulsory that everyone in the region has to submit a digital form, the digital Form D, and that we have been able to accomplish that. Of course, it took us a couple of years, but today we are ready digitally to exchange the Form D. And we are not just stopping at there. In fact, today we are looking beyond that. We are even looking at, for example, the next stage of documents, including, for example, the ASEAN Customs Declaration document. And even amongst the member states, we are moving ahead, including to add e-FITO certifications to make it, again, all digitally binding. So there is a lot of effort physically happening, but at the same time, we are also realizing that some of our digital online infrastructure that we had set up a couple of decades ago, it's not as interoperable as we think it is, and we need to improve that technology and the platforms. And because today it's not just within ourselves, some of our trading partners, some of the largest trading partners like China and Japan, they are knocking our doors, including the UK, trying to explore whether we could also have our customs to digitally exchange our documents and information with one another with the ASEAN single window. So there's a lot happening on our side. And we are, like I said, we are in the period where we are hoping to also embrace trade digitalization itself in a very significant way. Some of our member states, like Thailand, like Singapore, we have been a lot more active in terms of exploring ways to have even cross-border digital exchange documents exchanged with one another. And like I said, it's not an easy task. And nowhere in our region we are thinking about harmonizing digital documentation in that manner. But I think what we are glad to know is that technology today is good enough for us to work towards interoperabilities. And that's the name of the game that we are embracing on our side. And this is where we are looking towards global organizations like the ICC, including the Digital Standards Initiative team, to help us sort out what the global rules should be. I personally believe, with the many years of my experience in trade, that the rules harmonization is not going to come from governments or from region to region. There's no way that's going to happen. And the only way we can actually seek harmonization is through the private sector, through the ICC and through DSI coming together to help us sort out and working with all of the associations, including the shipping associations, in order to ensure that we achieve that. I mean, look, for the paper trade that we've been doing for the last 80, 90 years, we have that. I don't see why the private sector cannot sort out the analog, the digital version when they have been doing it for the analog version all this while. So just brief ideas. I just want to stop here. And Sean, can I hand it back to you for now?
You've touched on some really important points there. And I just make the observation. You said that a lot of this needs to happen through the private sector. And I agree. The problem there, of course, is that we will continue to have digital islands, silos. And so I want to come on to, one of the points that you've raised, and really one of the big themes of this panel, which is how we achieve interoperability. Because there are, I guess, two basic ways you can do that. You can either have a monopoly, excuse me, a monopoly or oligopoly of a couple of big platforms. Everybody uses them, right? And there's not that many big platforms left now, because that hasn't worked, because the adoption hasn't happened at scale. Or you can have a truly interoperable open ecosystem. And I think there is where it's very important that we have standards, and that actually all the different providers, there's some great providers here, one in the previous panel, and others as well, who I know very well through it, for providing these technological solutions, these bits of software almost. But to be interoperable, they have to have similar technical standards. And I think this is where ICC and the DSI especially has done some fantastic work. I would just put a plug in there that digital prom notes and bills of exchange use the ITFA DDoC standards. And it's great that you haven't reinvented the wheel where it wasn't necessary, but you've gone out and taken the best of what's available. But can I pass on now to you, Hannah Yugen, and tell us, what you've been doing at DSI, and what's the next stage for you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sean. And a great pleasure for me to be joining you today on this panel. And I really love what has been discussed so far about, the various aspects of interoperability. I think what you said earlier, Savinda, about, the private sector really playing a big role in driving this effort across the ecosystem, across sectors and countries is really important, because that's the only way in which I think it would work, because, all the various other efforts to do it singularly in silos are only driven by one industry or by one single country or region. I don't think that has worked so far. So to your question, Sean, I think when we talk about interoperability, this is a big word. And I think I was listening to the previous panel where I think our panelists spent a fair amount of time talking about, documents, the experience from the ops team, trying to look through 10 different documents that needed to send to banks, or people sending PDF to each other. So that's obviously is still a reality today. But when you talk about a very near future, which we are moving towards, and of course, taking advantage of the emerging technologies which are now dawning upon us, I think it's very important for us to realize that we need a very solid foundation to build upon. And that's actually, how do we move from a world where documents still dominate the way we transmit data to each other, and then let the different supply chain actors up and down the chain to do their work, to do whatever process that they need to do, whether it's a commercial exchange of data through a purchase order, commercial invoice, or for a shipping and transport process, the bills of lading, the road consignment note, or to your financial processes, right? Your bills of exchange, promissory notes, and so on. And of course, not to forget the very important customs and regulatory border process, which you need to do before and after the shipment. So a very important piece of work which we have been working with a global community of experts, both from the practitioners, the standards development organizations, the regulators, and the industry associations as well, has been to look at this complete set of key trade documents that power our current supply chains, and think about what are the existing standards that are already existing, how can we leverage them better, not just in their own vertical, but across the line, so that what we can have is aligning, not just the documents, but the key data elements that are now flowing across them that needs to be cross-checked. So in order to reduce this unnecessary work, which of course, leads to costs and time delays and even errors, right? We want to have the single source of truth in which wherever you are in that supply chain, upstream, downstream, whether you are the main players or you are the service providers, you can have access to that single source of truth and have the same definitions, the same understanding using the same global standards. So that piece of work, the key trade documents and data elements, is something that we are launching next week. So do look out for that. I think that would illuminate a lot of areas in which we didn't think that there were a lot of standardization, but actually there are. So the good news is that when you talk about, trying to have everybody talk the same language, the good news is there's a lot of standards already out there, and a high degree of adoption in certain segments. But what we now need is to make sure that everyone have access to the same tool set, of what are the standards, what are the document references, what are the things that can put leverage across the supply chain, so that, just to borrow your words, not to reinvent the wheel. And for example, whether if somebody wants to digitize a trade finance process, or whether it's a shipping and transport process, or trying to integrate all of that onto one single platform, they know where to start. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Hannah. And I think you made a really important point. I think the most philosophical discussion I've ever had with anybody was a German, actually. Maybe surprising, Marcus, you're still here. But he said, the point he made to me was, and of course what DSI have done through the KTDDE is to have semantic models and standards for each document. But they really, as Hannah was saying, what we should be thinking about is data. That data, though, I would just make the point, which actually was almost going to ask a question to the last panel. That data, if you get it in the right format, can be very powerful. So words, I'll put on my lawyer hat here, words can have the right words in the right place can have a very powerful effect. So you use the right words to create a promissory note, and actually, what Miles was talking about earlier on, to change a PDF from just a confirmation of delivery to a bill of exchange is actually digitally very simple to do, but it's a very, very powerful effect. And this is what our friends at Merkel have been doing as well. But let me pass on to Dan, because we've got data, we've got the standards of the various documents, and we all know there are a lot of documents in a typical trade and a lot of parties. They all need to feed into the arrival point. You know, that's customs, that's ports, and so on. Now, you at Deloitte have been you've created and you run a system for the government. Can you tell us how that works and you know, what the challenges were and what you had to do to get it running, and how successful is it actually?
All right, thank you. And if I would have to talk about all of the challenges, we would probably
We'd
need
be here all
another day on the program. But so challenges we always find. But the driver for what we've been doing and what we've been doing is the Gateway to Britain project. The driver was really the assessment that we made, and also from our practice as global trade advisors in general, both to governments and to private players. We saw that even though there is a fairly high degree of digitization already in the supply chain, it is all, and as you mentioned it quite rightfully, there's a lot of digital islands. And if you look at the international trade ecosystem, and it has its varieties, there's a lot of complexity. There's so many stakeholders. We did the maths on it at some point, and not only on the arrival side, but only on the shipping side, you could easily be encountered with over a dozen. Easily, and that's not even exaggerating. So even the more complex situations, there you have your logistics providers, there you have your shippers, and then I come to data standards. What is a shipper? There's multiple definitions going around on what a shipper should be. You have your governments, that's not only the customs authorities, but you would have your phytosanitary authorities and so on and so forth. So what we came to the conclusion is that there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of things and good initiatives going on, but there's also a lot of pre-taken and preoccupied positions within this ecosystem. If you want to be the one changing it all and bringing in one solution to replace all others, well, I can guarantee almost nothing will happen, because everyone will stick to firm ground and will definitely not move towards the utilization of a common system. So from those premises, we decided, under the auspices of the Flemish government indeed, and then also supported by the Port of Antwerp-Bruges as an important yet sufficiently neutral stakeholder, we said, okay, so let's investigate now, what could we do to find that common ground where all the different stakeholders involved in the trade ecosystem can find something which they don't have as yet. A very important element to mention there is that we also predominantly focused on SMEs. Because if you're the large multinationals of this world, you have the budgets, you have the capabilities to have integrated supply chains, because your buyer is typically someone from within your group of companies anyway. So the system's already running in-house. But that is not the case for SMEs, and also for multinationals, of course. There are trade lanes where that is not necessarily the case. So what we said, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be easily understandable, it needs to be neutral. Not to step into the territory of existing parties which are having existing systems, existing models. So for instance, just to give an example, we never had the aspiration to replace the national customs clearance system, because that is in place. There was already a program running for years to replace that with a more modern system. Well, what were we going to do replacing that? No, nobody was interested in that, not in the least the customs authorities themselves. No, but what we did see as a challenge is to get that data into those systems. So there's quite a lot of systems, both at UK side, where we studied also on the Belgian, Flemish, European side, EU side, I should say. And there we came to the conclusion, well, rather than what is currently also a very nice and ongoing project, the EU single trade window initiative, maritime, and then the other one, the trade one. So there's even two single windows, which is a bit of a contradiction in terms, if you may ask me. But anyhow, they already are up to 1,000 data elements to talk about the data. Who's going to share 1,000 data elements and bring them all together? And then when you have all 1,000, okay, then we can proceed. Never going to happen, of course. No, we decided to keep it simple, focus on some 50 data elements, which are the most essential ones in international trade, which are the most common ones, and which are the ones most commonly shared and reused. Because we were talking about digital islands, but to be honest, when you need to go across the ocean, or through the Eurotunnel for that matter, well, we are using paper boats and trains. Because it has been mentioned by one of the previous speakers, we then make a PDF, at best, or a paper copy of a pro forma invoice or whatever document. And then at the other side, we at best scan it, but most of the times we key the data into our own little ecosystem, in our own little digital island. And that is what we wanted to get rid of. With those 50 key data elements, you will not be able to file a customs declaration, neither at EU side nor at UK side. But the most common data that a broker, an agent needs, or a company itself, to get that declaration completed, the other data they have themselves, that's the data they can utilize. So by bringing that across, we have been able to come up with a model which is currently in use in a pilot phase, but actual use for actual shipments by, let's say, a dozen of shippers, exporting parties, and also being utilized now here in the UK. So how does it work?
Yeah.
There are two views within this platform, the Gateway to Britain application. One view gives you a view on the trade view, as we call it. So how is the financial flow working? Who's selling to whom? What is the value of the goods? How many goods are involved? And so on and so forth. Also from a customs dimension with a reference to the customs clearance document, both at export side as well as import side. And the other view you get today in our system is the transport view. Because a logistics provider, and probably someone here will be able to confirm that later on, they look at the reality from a very different angle.
Yeah.
They look at the truck moving. There may be 20 pallets on the truck owned by 20 different parties and even 30 different export declarations underneath them. So that is a completely different view on things. And we've been able within the platform, at least we like to believe so, and I hope the pilots will confirm, to match that trade view with that transport view so that you can get across the board for the transporter a view on, are all those customs declarations released by the authorities? Can I move on with my process? And on the opposite side, from the trade view, oh, those goods, they are not even near the Eurotunnel. So why should I free up space at my warehouse to receive the truck? It's not coming anyway. So bringing that transparency within the supply chain and within the ecosystem, of course, with boundaries, because certain data is confidential and should not be shared with everyone. That paper invoice with the values, which is with the goods and ends up in the wrong hands. That's what we try to avoid. So there is access management to the data. And actually, today we see that the data is keeping pace with the goods, especially for trade with the UK. That's really important because a lot of goods get stuck at the border because people are waiting for the data to continue the process. And that's already where we see a huge advantage. Just to conclude, this is an initiative that emerged from the needs of that were caused by Brexit, obviously, all new situation there. But of course, it has the aspiration and I think also the possibility to become a gateway to X platform. Really, because if you can do this for trade in between the EU and the UK, why would it not work with Singapore? Why would it not work between the UK and Singapore, and so on and so forth? So again, to the previous point made, international standardization. So not replacing other systems, but being the SWIFT, being the Euroclear, if you would compare it with the financial environment.
Okay, so it's about sort of getting the right number of standards from the right people and feeding them into that that application and communication layer, which is very important, as you say, not least for other considerations. Maybe we're not really talking much about today, but supply chain resilience, security, and so on, and indeed political implications. A couple of days ago, we hosted our Trade and Investment Forum at ADIC, and we had Lord Offord, who was talking about the impact of the ETDA and actually the importance of getting the solution for this for the problems we've been having with Northern Ireland, which has a disproportionate number of checks because of the way the Brexit agreement was finally negotiated, a disproportionate amount of checks for a very small amount of EU trade. So speeding that up is hugely important as well. Now, the standards. So in your association, you're dealing with one category, or you cover one category of shippers, I suppose. We said there's multiple, or carriers, multiple definitions for that. What's your view on standards, and how do they feed into these sort of communication layers and portals?
Well, thank you very much, Sean, and thanks to all the previous speakers. I think we heard wonderful things today, and we also want to congratulate ICC for their digital standards initiative, which we are also participating in, contributing to. I think that initiative is very important. My personal, let's say, perspective is I started working in electronic data interchange standards development 33 years ago. And now, 2024, we still talk about the same issues. Issues really haven't changed. Replacing paper with an EDI message was a topic 33 years ago. It's a topic today. Now, 33 years ago, technology was very expensive, storage, telecommunication, what have you. That has changed completely. Now, everybody has a mobile phone, which has the capacity of a mainframe computer 30 years ago. Now, I think that technology development certainly also has brought on a lot of challenges. Replacing paper is important, and I think there are many, many good initiatives on the way. But I think the technology revolution that we saw over the last 30 years has brought new problems with it, a multitude of standards, etc. Now, the industry that I'm representing here today is the express industry. Our three members, DHL, FedEx, UPS, they're flying 1,500 aircraft every day from 220 territories and countries around the world. B2B, B2C, millions of shipments, different exporters, importers, consumers, what have you. So data is critical. Our industry has certainly very heavily invested in technology to get everything digitized from pickup to delivery, so that on demand we can produce electronic data, but also we can reproduce a hard copy on demand for authorities. We are dealing with disruptions every day because authorities, entities, stakeholders not talk to each other. They operate different systems. They call things different things. So the shipper in your environment is a different entity in my environment, and that's bad. So we are dealing with these disruptions, with these frictions that we see, and I think this is what we really want to bring to the discussion here, and that's why we also believe that the DSI initiative is so valuable, and that is that. With all the standardization that has taken place, we have to look into, and this is the topic of our panel here, interoperability. Now, what does it mean, interoperability? We can look at interoperability from a technology point of view, that my phone is talking to your phone, and that your computer is talking to my computer. That's fine. Now, I still, this morning, when I packed my bag, had to bring my converter for the electric plug. Now, so much about standardization. Still doesn't work. So technology is still presenting challenges here. The other side of the interoperability is semantic. And the DSI initiative is critically here in this regard. Personally, I have been working in the customs space. I'm a German customs officer from origin. Working in EDI development for customs, and worked in the WCO, developing the data model there, so that at least on the customs side, there is interoperability in data. Yeah, wishful thinking. It is that easy, but then going beyond customs, you go to the banks, you go to the transport industry, you go to other sectors, insurance, what have you, travel, tourism. They all have different vocabularies and semantics. We have to bring this together so that we can speak the same language, and then we can exchange them. And for the exchange, it is critically important that all standards, be it semantic or be it technology, that we are having open standards. Because that's the next friction that we have, that very often we get into vendor logs. that you choose one vendor and then you're in there. The problem that you just described, don't touch my system, you know, don't come close to my system. You can do whatever you like, but don't come close to me. I think we have to break this up. Otherwise, we will never have true interoperability, true digitization, because we still maintain those frictions, because this is my little silo and that's your little silo, and the systems won't talk to each other because I'm using, let's say, vendor X and you are using vendor Y. Let's think about the USB-C connector discussion we had in the European Union. What a nightmare for certain vendors. You know, they were fighting it. Why? You know, what's the problem? Oh yeah, well, it takes away potentially some customers. And that's what it is. It's business. And we should refrain from making international standardization and interoperability a business. Look at trade lanes. Everybody was hoping trade lanes would become the, you know, best thing since sliced bread. It failed. Why? Because it's not, let's say, open. It is proprietary. You know, you have to pay for it. You know, people have to pay for standards. Why do we have to pay for standards? So if that is becoming an issue, then we have, again, frictions and silos. So our industry is certainly very much digitalized, but we look for interoperability, for open standards going forward. And I hope that this initiative from the ICC and other initiatives going on will lead to that.
Thank you. I mean, you made an important point there about the multiple parties, of course, and that's another reason why having single platforms probably wouldn't work, because actually what you need is a whole bunch of people to come together using interoperable standards.
Right.
So that those, we all know there's that fantastic graphic showing all the number of interactions and data points in a typical import and export, and there are, you know, dozens and dozens of them. It's wishful thinking, you get everybody on one platform. So let's have interoperable standards. I agree. You need to live this and breathe this. You need to make it work at your employer, but you're also a student of some of this. So give us first your sort of practical experiences. Is this working for companies such as you? And, you know, from the research you've done, is there anything else that we need to do?
Okay, so first of all, thanks for having me. So I will be reflecting on my past work experience. I'm fairly new to Collins Aerospace, and I have, well, haven't finished the research. It's still work in progress. That sounds like a never-ending story. But yeah, I'm particularly interested in the advanced customs and trade technologies available, how these can empower the UK-based manufacturers. My research is focusing on EU trade, EU-UK trade, specifically road trade. So just to give you an example of how things worked at my previous company I worked for. So in the past, have utilized the technology, the custom software. So we did create our own import and export declarations, and the ASNs, the advanced shipment notices. So the way it worked, our supplier, usually the EU exporter, was sending us the ASN either directly to our SAP system, SAP GTS, or there was a special login for the supplier if their system was not integrated via the APIs to our SAP GTS. So they did send the shipment information, so all the essentials that are needed for the customs declarations. So we did receive the ASNs into our SAP system, and because of the API capabilities, we connected the SAP into our custom software. So that way, the information flew from the exporter straight into our custom software. So we were able to use that data to pre-lodge the goods. We also operated under the customs special procedures called CFSP. I think it's a formal name. So basically, the way it worked, the exporter sending us the ASN, sent the goods into the consolidation hub in Germany. The goods were consolidated, so that was under the group shipments. The freight forwarder collected export declarations and crossed the border. The goods already had the frontier declaration as part of the CFSP process. So we did actually outsource those because the software that we used was unfortunately not supportive of the frontier declarations. But nevertheless, the goods came in to our premises, and we already had that information about what's coming in, exactly the number of the pallets, the quantities, the boxes, what parts there were, and we were able to do the cross checks and declare the goods according to the CFSP. We've had 30 days or up until the 4th of the following month to declare it, but we were doing it ASAP, really. And that brings some of the challenges. As you know, a lot of companies had to prepare for the CDS change. So that was a little bit of a challenge because we did receive a few errors now and then. We had to rectify it as soon as possible. Yeah, and it was also on the CDS side of things. So we had to communicate with the HMRC or TDR technical teams to resolve the issues. We did have some instances where the goods were not able to be exported because the system wasn't working correctly. And again, sometimes it was down to the custom software. Sometimes it was on the HMRC side of things, and the GVMS, if I remember correctly. So yeah, as a trader, we did have these challenges, and I believe the communication could have been improved with the authorities, if I'm honest. But equally at the same time, we
weren't using Dan's system.
No.
It wasn't in existence.
Exactly.
So yeah, as much as you run in the operations 24/7, you can't afford any stoppages at the production line. That's right. And with regards to the perishable goods, basically, well, you don't want eggs to turn into an omelette because the goods are stuck in customs. So yeah, these were the challenges. So my research that I'm actually very passionate about. So I am looking into the strategic use of the UK single trade window once it will become implemented. I'm focusing specifically on the third phase of the global interoperability. So this is the UK single trade window that will be able to talk to other single trade windows, which is like, I think we've got a pretty good example at Asia Pacific, where the systems are well integrated with each other. And yeah, also that's in line with the WTO trade facilitation agreement. I think it's fair to mention that. And yeah, with regards to some other technological aspects, sorry, going back to the UK single trade window, there's one thing I have forgot to mention about the supply chain connectivity. Because pretty much what the previous employer did, you pretty much are able to do the same thing, follow the same logic. So have the exporter to ship the data straight into the UK single trade window, process that data, raise the customs declaration, and in case of any mismatches or any extra information needed, the function of the multiple users that will be allowed within the UK single trade window frame will allow that opportunity. So exporters sending their shipping data into the UK single trade window, either the freight forwarder or UK importer adding some additional information, goods are cleared.
Okay, thanks. I'll stop you there because I can hear the passion in your voice. It's great you're passionate about what seems a very dry but actually super important subject. I know we've run over a bit. Do we have any time for questions? Maybe one?
Maybe one, yes.
Maybe one. I can always get something out of it.
Better be a good one then.
Make it a good one. We've got the best question in the audience. Oh, two really good questions. Ladies first.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the all the participants. I would have a question for Mrs. Satchinvan, the Deputy Secretary General, but I will just link to first what Mr. Dietmar said about the standards and the single window in the EU, that we know it's not working according to all the reports that were made, because the member states had, all of them, as you said, different, don't touch mine, I have my own. And now, according to what the Commission said, it has to be top down. So they're going to do their own, and the member states have to follow. So my question to you, Mr. Deputy, is has the ASEAN already, the countries or the community already thought of any agreements with the EU on standardizing through a trade agreement on the digitalization with the EU, on standardizing then any type of agreement, so that the import and export with the EU becomes something easier in the future, provided that provided that the single window works in the future?
Yeah. Can I ask you to answer that very quickly?
Quick, I think the quick answer to that is we will not want to, we do not want to put our efforts into harmonization, because we don't think that's going to be practical for ASEAN. We are trading with many dozen nations in the world, many dozens. So it's almost impossible for us to put energies to sit down and spend years trying to harmonize with the European Union. And then we have to again sit with China and sit with the United States, sit with many other countries to figure that out. I think we are really, that's where I think it's critical and important. We are really hoping that the professional agencies that are responsible with the analog documents, the whole value chain of trade, the shipping associations, the International ICC Banking Commission, the whole value chain, those guys, all of you need to sit and figure that out, what the standard rules need to be. And believe me, we all, the governments, we are not ready to create our own standards and rules. Why should we? Because we're trading with the rest of the world. It'd be ridiculous for ASEAN to create our own standards and then again deal bilaterally with another region. And then again, we are stuck. We have to go and figure out how to go and do trade with other parts of the world. So it's better for how trade is happening today, the analog way, similar way on the digital side. It's good to have the ICC Digital Standards Initiative take the center stage, and for all of the professional bodies, associations to come behind them and support them actively and not do your own thing. And same thing with at the regional level, the governments, we need to let go and let the professional bodies figure this out for us so that we can move forward and create an open system and interoperable rules that we can use with one another. I think that's the way forward.
Thank you, Satchinvan. A big endorsement of the work that's being done by all the trade associations. Nick's looking very angry at me, so I will shut down. Thank you very much, and thanks to my great panel.
Well, thank you, Sean, and apart from the timekeeping, on my thing it says remind the delegates to be properly back at 11:45. We'll make it 12 o'clock, so we've lost 15 minutes, but that'll come out of your lunchtime. That's your fault. So please be back in your seats for 12 o'clock. Thank you very much indeed for that morning session, and have a good cup of coffee.